If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. This quote comes directly from a man who most historians consider the greatest president in American history, Abraham Lincoln. But was his leadership truly influential in the Civil War? Did he play a vital role in the Union victory? I'm your host, Man Hathaway, and today we will dive into the events surrounding the Civil War and set the record straight on this new episode of History's Mysteries. To begin to solve this mystery, we are joined by historian Georgia Clooney. Now, Miss Clooney, Lincoln was a strong leader with the capability to unite and inspire a nation at war with itself. Do you think Lincoln's public image played a key role in the ultimate Union victory?
Well, Lincoln was certainly a great orator and had a commanding presence. This is best illustrated by his delivery of the Gettysburg Address, a world-famous speech, at the National Cemetery of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on November 19th of 1863. Though his speech was only 272 words long, it is one of the most memorable in all of American history, with the famous start 77 years ago. Through this presentation, Lincoln invoked the principles of human equality that were contained in the Declaration of Independence and connected the sacrifices of the Civil War with a desire for the birth of a new freedom. Prior to the Gettysburg Address, on January 1st of the same year, Lincoln delivered the Emancipation Proclamation as well. In this speech, he stated that all persons held as slaves within the Confederate States are and henceforth shall be free. While this statement was not intended to end slavery, it started the domino effect of the end of this abusive institution. Black Americans were finally able to join the Union Army and fight for their continued freedom. In addition, his speech changed the war from the Union into a war against slavery, which gave it a moral spark for abolitionists to fight harder for the Union. Finally, his speech associated slavery with the Confederates, and since both France and England were against slavery, they and other foreign nations chose not to side with the Confederacy in the war.
Lincoln certainly did have a prestigious reputation, but not everyone would agree that his public image was influential in the Union victory.
Georgia doesn't know what she's talking about. Lincoln's image was nothing more than a facade. The inspiration and momentum the Union gained in 1863 was due to the actual victory at Gettysburg itself, not from the politician who sits and watches from the serenity of Washington. Lincoln merely utilized the Gettysburg victory to promote his own public image and the Union cause. But American heroes like General John Buford and John Reynolds sparked the fire that would lead to the ultimate Union victory.
There are several instances in which Lincoln contradicted his liberator-esque persona. Lincoln and his cabinet reversed constitutional rights, particularly with the suppression of the writ of habeas corpus in 1861. Habeas corpus is a human right and legal procedure that protects against unlawful or indefinite imprisonment. It can actually be seen in the Constitution's text. Article 1, Section 9 states, "The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it." Well, according to Abe Lincoln, the public safety did in fact require it, and he suspended it between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to give military authorities the necessary power to silence dissenters and rebels. But the public did not like this, as it saw it as an overstep of the federal government's power. Protests only increased, and in May of that year, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney of Maryland issued Ex parte Maryland, challenging the authority of President Lincoln and seeking to reinstate habeas corpus. Regardless of his reputation and ability to inspire, Lincoln had major influence in the maintenance of the U.S. government during the Civil War, especially with his ratification of the Emancipation Proclamation. But how truly impactful was the Emancipation Proclamation?
Now listen, I know I just told you all about how the Emancipation Proclamation increased public support and thus boosted morale, and that's true. But it didn't do much more than that. The Emancipation Proclamation only applied to states that had already seceded from the Union and left slavery untouched in all the states that were still loyal to the Union. William Seward, Lincoln's own Secretary of State, said, "We show our sympathy with slavery by emancipating slaves where we cannot reach them, and holding them in bondage where we can set them free." Furthermore, the freedom that was promised depended on the Union's military victory. If Lincoln wanted to preserve and change the Union as much as he claimed he did, his promised freedom would not be conditional. The fact that an underground railroad still had to exist during this time, and radical Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens, an abolitionist and member of the House of Representatives during the time of the Civil War, still had to fight on the Congress floor for freedom of enslaved people, just goes to show how truly ineffective the Emancipation Proclamation was.
Okay, for once I actually agree with Georgia on this one. The Emancipation Proclamation allowed slavery to continue in so many states, like Kentucky, for example. At the beginning of the Civil War, Kentucky was one of the largest slave states in the entire U.S., with an enslaved population making up about 25% of the entire state. And Article 9 of the Kentucky's Constitution even says, quote, "The legislature shall have no power to pass laws for the emancipation of slaves without the consent of their owners or paying their owners previous to such emancipation." However, since Kentucky was loyal to the Union throughout the entire war, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to them, which means that Lincoln let states like Kentucky and many others continue their practice of slavery.
Beyond the Emancipation Proclamation, did Lincoln's political policies and achievements really have major effects on the Union victory? Roberta, back to you. Now to me, this question is harder than the others. On one hand, yes, Lincoln made a major political strides to unite the nation and support the Union cause. He created a superstar cabinet, he inspired the nation with the Gettysburg Address, and with the creation of the United States Colored Troops in May of 1863, he enlisted over 180,000 black soldiers into the Union Army, with the first colored troops joining the battle in Kansas, Louisiana, and South Carolina. But none of these accomplishments are what truly led to their victory. The Union victory was not because of President Lincoln's efforts, but rather due to the Confederacy's continual diplomatic and militaristic failures. For example, during the Trent Affair on November 8, 1962, the Confederates failed to gain recognition from the European nations as a sovereign state, which doomed their cause in independence in the future. Additionally, Lincoln's policies did have their flaws. Kentucky is a prime example of an exception from Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Kentucky was a member of the Union, however, they were still a slave state. Lincoln's continual lack of consistency within the Union proves to have been his largest flaw. This ultimately created division within the Union at its most vulnerable time, as the admittance of slave states such as Kentucky angered abolitionists like Thaddeus Stevens, who sought stricter policies. Today, we dove into one of history's most coveted mysteries. Was Lincoln's leadership decisive in the Union victory? After hearing from three incredibly profound perspectives, especially Roberta's, the mystery remains unsolved. It is clear that Lincoln had many impacts on the Union. However, maybe his success was merely just the failures of another. To come to consensus, we turn to our viewers and ask you all to describe Lincoln in one word. Here we go.
Weak. Facade.
Pretty boy. Bum.
Schmuck.
No, actually, I really don't think it can just be summed up in one word. The truth is...
Well, there you have it. Lincoln's leadership was, in fact, influential. However, clearly not the driving force behind the Union's victory. I'm Mahan Hathaway. This is History's Mysteries, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.